What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Celio's Network. Today I am covering the second Special League Ginza, which was an 8-person invitational held in Japan, with Darkness Ablaze being the newest set, or I guess it was Infinity Zone for them. For us, it will roughly translate as the Ultra Prism through Darkness Ablaze format, which will be Darkness Ablaze legal, but pre-rotation. We do have a kind of a major online tournament coming up in that format, which I will link down below. It's called the Atlas Pokemon Online Global Championships, I believe. I will probably be making a video talking more about that. I'm not sure if that will be before or after this video goes up, but it will be probably within a day or two of this video. But I hadn't seen anyone talking about this. It features a couple champions, a couple content creators from Japan, some interesting decks to look at in this format, and all of the games are on YouTube as well. So I will link this site as well as the YouTube videos for the matches. And we'll get into talking about the deck lists. First, I want to shout out PotownStore.com, the best place for you to get PTCGO codes, and make sure you use code CELIO for 5% off over there. So we're starting out with an ADPZ deck that actually won the tournament, piloted by Denora. Not familiar with this player prior to this. It doesn't have a lot of new cards in it. It does use Rayquaza GX and Energy Switch to try to accelerate energy quickly to ADP in another way. In addition to the Metal Saucer plus Energy Switch, they also have the Rayquaza plus Energy Switch. Something I don't think we've really seen done before now, but definitely interesting to see. And they're also using two new cards, which are the Duraludon that swings for 30 and attaches this metal energy from the discard pile to one of your Pokemon, and they're using the new Crobat V, which is kind of like Shaman, but you can only use it once a turn. When you play it down, draw until you have 6 cards in hand. So ADPZ, still a strong deck. Do keep in mind this is a small sample size. It was only an 8-person invitational. But still some cool decks, still some great players in this tournament. But not a lot to really talk about with this deck in terms of new cards and the new format and things like that. Just a couple new things in it. Salamence V also gets better now that there are more strong VMAXs coming out. So this was the first place list, and in the finals it beat Takuya YoneDe, which is a name that a lot of you may recognize. He's won Worlds before, unless I'm mistaken. I actually think it said this up at the top. YoneDe, I believe, has won Worlds before, if I'm not mistaken. Sorry if I confused him with another Japanese player while recording this video, but I'm pretty sure he's won Worlds. So he played a really interesting deck. So it's Falinks V plus a Tapu Koko V lightning package, and the Tapu Koko can actually power up a Falinks as well. So they're using the Falinks V because it's strong versus 2 new Fighting Week cards. There's Vikavolt V and there's also Eternatus VMAX, which are both really great cards that are new. They actually came out in different sets for them. Vikavolt came out in Explosive Walker, and Eternatus VMAX came out in Infinity Zone in Japan. But fighting is really strong if you have an efficient, if you could efficiently stream fighting attackers, you'll do really well versus Vikavolt V and versus Eternatus VMAX. So that's what they were used for. And then Koko V is a solid attacker that swings 200. It hits weakness versus Salamence VMAX. It has free retreat, and it also pairs well with the Ultra Prism because it can accelerate either Koko V or your Falinks, your baby Falinks. So yeah, basically this is kind of a simple strategy of let's use fighting types and then cover a couple things with Koko V, as well as having good energy acceleration that synergizes between the two. But then there's some fancy stuff happening within the deck. So very simple on the surface. Let's use fighting type and a nice backup attacker that pivots and has energy acceleration. But it's also using some giant bombs. They're using capture energy, which is cool. The 4 twin energy for Falinks. 4 Pokemon catcher, which a lot of times players don't like flippy cards, but YoneDe actually chose to play 4 Pokemon catchers and 2 of the new Turbo Patch in this deck. Turbo Patch
Flip a coin if heads, attach a basic energy from your discard pile to one of your basic non-GX Pokemon, so you can accelerate that energy to Falinks, Falinks V, or Tapu Koko V in this deck. They're also playing the new Bird Keeper card. Draw 3, or switch your Pokemon and then draw 3. Really good utility card that I am kind of liking so far in testing. The big thing about this deck is in post-rotation for us, we will lose Thunder Mountain, and we won't have Thunder Mountain anymore. Of course, we will still have the Ultra Prism, though. So this is a really unique deck. I don't think anybody thought about combining Falinks with Koko V. Like, it just doesn't sound like it makes sense. But like I said, it's a pretty basic concept. Like, let's just hit for fighting weakness and then have another strong attacker that can just dish out 200 damage. Another thing about this deck is it was not using Electro Power, which is something we lose in post-rotation, so this deck technically doesn't lose as much as some other Lightning-type decks do, if you want to consider this a Lightning deck, since it is playing a fairly important Lightning package and focuses on Lightning basic energy. So the big thing this will lose is Thunder Mountain and also the counter gain. The 4 Pokemon catchers really unique, though. I guess they're just taking advantage of all of the weak Pokemon that the Eternatus VMAX will have on the bench. If they can't knock out an Eternatus VMAX, they can always just go for a Crobat V and knock that out pretty easily. And just all of the Denes and Crobat Vs and Eldegoss in the format in general. Just a lot of 2 prize Pokemon sitting on the bench. So I imagine that's what that was trying to take advantage of. So that's the second place deck. Going forward, I don't know the placements of the decks. I'm not sure if it really says it anywhere, but those are the top 2 in an 8-person tournament, and the rest are just interesting to look at, in my opinion. I'm not sure if they're in order of how they placed from here on out, just kind of disclaiming that. So this deck is really awesome. It's another deck that we will not be able to play in post-rotation, but we will be able to play in Ultra Prism through Darkness Ablaze. It's Vikavolt, but with a sleepy package plus a poison package, so this deck could just do a lot of annoying things to you. So Vikavolt can start item locking turn 1 with Thunder Mountain energy. You can also use Ultra Prism to attack turn 1 with your energy acceleration item lock, and if you do that, you can also get Slumbering Forest out and put them to sleep with Mareep. And if there's a Stadium out as early as turn 2, you can start poisoning them with Garbodor. Since that's an evolution, you can't do that turn 1. So you can item lock them. So item lock, poison, and sleep. Of course, you also have some paralysis going on with a Alolan Raichu tag team. You have HP buff with the Toughness Cloak, healing with Malolana, gusting with Boss's Order. The only thing that I think this is missing is probably energy removal with some Crushing Hammers or Yell Grunts, but you probably don't need that if you're item locking them, putting them to sleep, and poisoning them, buffing your damage with Electro Power. This just looks like a very annoying deck potentially to play against. So I do think people might be trying this out for the POG tournament that I was mentioning. And also to note, this was piloted and created by Shintaro Ito, who is a legendary player of the game. So this is a really interesting one that I'll probably be trying out myself. Next we have a Decidueye deck by Yuta Komatsuda. Not sure I've ever heard of this player before, but an interesting ADP Decidueye deck. So the new Decidueye, of course, has the ability it cannot be damaged by VMAX or GX Pokemon. So the plan here is alter creation and then swing with a Pokemon that can't be damaged by V and GX Pokemon for the rest of the game. So again, kind of a pretty simple concept. Like, let's buff our damage, buff the prize cards we're taking, and then just swing with a Pokemon that blocks damage from other strong Pokemon. But it's a very, like, technically built deck. It's actually a greens variant because Decidueye is your only ability, and that's not coming into play until turn 2 at the earliest, but probably more like turn 3. So you'll want to set up your ADP, get your energy, get your alter creation off, set up a couple rowlets on the bench, and then from there you have counter gain energy to just go into a Decidueye if they immediately knock out your ADP. But you have a lot of options with the Green's Exploration. You can slow your opponent down for a turn with Wait and See Hammer if you opt to go second. You can search out your rare candy reliably to get your Decidueye down when it's time to play down Decidueye. You also have Rosa as an option for when your Pokemon are knocked out. And like I mentioned, you have counter gain, so you could just go like greens for counter gain energy spinner and set up your Decidueye when it's time after your ADP's already used Alter Creation and it got knocked out. If your ADP isn't knocked out, you can actually get a turn of Ultimate Ray off, which could be very nice. So this is a really cool deck. It's kind of simple because you're just playing 2 basic Pokemon. You're playing 4 Rowlet and 3 ADP, and it's green, so you don't want to have Pokemon with powers. So an interesting deck. I'm not sure how good it is. I have not tried anything like this myself, but just looking at the list at a glance, I think is really cool and something I would like to try. Next we have Santos, who piloted an Eternatus VMAX list. 4-3 Eternatus VMAX. If you don't know what Eternatus VMAX does, 340 HP. It has an ability that says if all of your bench Pokemon are dark, you can have 8 bench Pokemon. If at any time those Pokemon aren't dark anymore, discard down to 5. And then it does 30 damage for every dark Pokemon you have in play, so it swings for 270 for 2 energy, which is a ton of damage. So this plays just a bunch of dark Pokemon to get onto your bench. It plays the 4 Crobat V that draw up to 6, plays Zigzagoon to get extra damage in, the Meowth that swings for 60 on turn 1 for free, and then it plays some Sneasels and Weaviles. So the Weavile with Evil Admonition is solid. It does 50 for every ability on your opponent's board for 1 energy. And then the other Weavile, of course, moves energy around, and you can accelerate energy down with Darkrai Prism. And then Sneaky Smash Sneasel is actually something important to note here, because if you go second, you can discard an energy from one of your opponent's Pokemon. So definitely something to note there. You can put your opponent back a turn on energy, and then just use Weavile GX to switch that energy you attach to Sneasel over to your Eternatus VMAX on turn 2. But there are a lot of things this list in particular are losing in rotation. It loses Evil Admonition Weavile, it loses the Sneaky Smash Sneasel, it loses Darkrai Prism, and it loses Yveltal GX with Doom Count. So Eternatus VMAX decks will not look anything like this really in post-rotation, but Eternatus VMAX is definitely going to be strong. Maybe we'll see some decks like this in the UPR Darkness Ablaze format, which will be pretty short-lived for us. Next we have a Pika ROM deck, or maybe you could even refer to it as a Lightning Box deck, since it does have a lot of emphasis on the Boltund and the Vikavolt, since you have Turbo Patches in this deck. And Turbo Patches can't be used with Pika ROM, but they can be Turbo Patched onto Boltund or Vikavolt, and then energy switched over to your Pika ROM. So this is a really cool deck. Another one that I don't think will be extremely prevalent in the post-rotation format, namely because we lose Thunder Mountain and Electric Power to rotation. But I think this is really cool for the Ultra Prism through Darkness Ablaze format, since you have just a myriad of lightning attackers. You have Pika ROM, Alolan Raichu, Boltund, Vikavolt V, and even Zeraora GX sometimes as an attacker. And the Turbo Patch works on Boltund V and Vikavolt, and then you could just energy switch it over to Pika ROM, like I said. But this loses a lot in rotation because you're losing Electric Power, which allows your Pokemon to have pretty average damage outputs to do above average damage. And you also lose Thunder Mountain, which allows you to attack earlier than you normally would be able to. But I really love this concept. It reminds me of Water Box from a few years ago, where you could Quaking Punch early on while you're setting up your other Pokemon, or just Quaking Punch in the matchups where it was good. You could do something similar here with the paralyzing whatever attack on Vikavolt V that does 50 item lock, and you could just start doing that turn 1 with either Turbo Patch or Cocoa Prism or Thunder Mountain. You have 3 different energy acceleration options for that, and you can do buffed damage with Electric Power. And how many lists do we have left here? We just have 2 lists left here. We have Mr. Rivoli, which I misread as Ravioli the first time looking over these. And they played Charizard VMAX, Salamence VMAX, which I don't think is a very good deck. I think this was just like a, let's throw some really cool looking dragon Pokemon, or whatever you want to call Charizard, in a deck. They're big Pokemon with big damage outputs. It'll look cool. It'll be fun to play. But I don't really think it's any good. Charizard VMAX does do 300. But it's for 5 energy. And it doesn't one-shot other VMAXs. So, like, reaching for that kind of attack when you're not one-shotting other VMAXs unless they're weak to you, probably isn't worth it, in my opinion. Salamence VMAX is actually solid. It swings 240 for 4 energy. It could do 40 to 2 Pokemon for 1. And Salamence V does 20 to everything for 3 energy. So I think Salamence is actually solid. Not a fan of Charizard VMAX. I think this was kind of just like a, I'm in an invitational. There's a lot of good players in this tournament. I'm going to play something that's fun, has cool Pokemon in it, and maybe I'll do well. That's kind of how I see this deck. And then the last one was just another, no, actually, I'm sorry, it's not another Pika ROM deck, it's a Bolt Hunt deck. And this deck is completely invalid post-rotation because we lose Zeraora, GX, and Shuckle, and turn 1 you want to use Zeraora GX's GX attack to just accelerate 5 extra energy to the board. And then now you also have Turbo Patch, so in the Ultra Prism through Darkness Ablaze format, this deck gets a huge buff because it was already like borderline good, and now you also have Turbo Patches to work with and Crobat V for a little bit of extra draw. You could even throw in a Vikavolt there in case you need that like early game, or you stall out later and you need to stall your opponent as well. But I think this deck could actually be really strong in the Ultra Prism through Darkness Ablaze format, since you can Shuckle into Zeraora and then hit a couple heads on Turbo Patches and have just a lot of energy accelerated onto your board. So that's all of the Pokemon, that's all of the decks here that we have from the Ginza Special League 2. And yeah, that's all the information I have for you today. I just wanted to review those decks a bit with you. And like I said, I definitely think these decks are viable, or most of them are viable to look at for the Pokemon Online Global Championships, which I'm going to link down in the description below. So just to review, I'm going to link the site where these decks are. I'm going to link the POG tournament. I'm going to link the videos of the streams from this Special League Ginza 2, and of course, as always, I'll have all of my informations and social medias down there below. Subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more content like this in the future, and also leave a like if you liked the video. Check out PotownStore.com for all of your PTCGO needs, and I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.